Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the Live Without Training Wheels show. I'm your host, Lynna Sutherland, owner and author at Homeschooling Without Training Wheels, mother to 8 great kiddos, ages teen down to toddler. And tonight we are here to talk about life beyond homeschooling. And no, I'm not talking about, when your last kid graduates and you're empty nesting and you get to put on that veteran homeschool mom badge. I don't have any experience with that, but I'm talking about right now in your everyday life beyond homeschooling. Hello, Sarah from cloudy California. I'm here in Virginia on the opposite coast, and it's been cloudy here today too. So imagine that. Let me get to a few housekeeping details, and then we'll jump into our topic for tonight. First of all, as you probably know, we are live streaming from a platform called Crowdcast. So we are also streaming this show to Facebook and to YouTube. If you're watching from Facebook or YouTube, you are more than welcome to keep watching from that location. But if you want to participate in the discussion, in the comments and asking questions, then you'll want to join us here inside the Crowdcast show. All you need to do is look in the video description, and there's a link that you can follow to hop right in here with us into the Crowdcast show. You're going to get the best engagement on a desktop or laptop just because it's easier to type, but it's perfectly fine to watch from a mobile device. All you want to do is turn it into landscape mode, press the square in the top right corner to go full screen, and then tap view chat, and you'll be seeing just what you'd be seeing if you were on the desktop. Also, be sure to answer the poll at the bottom underneath my face there. Let's see if we've gotten any answers coming in so far. What I'm curious about tonight is if you have a life beyond homeschooling. This is a question with absolutely no judgment, and it's completely anonymous. I'm just curious to know what kind of an audience we have here. So we have about a third of our audience says yes, and 2/3 say no, but I'd like to. And another answer choice is no, but I'm fine with that for now. And that is also a completely acceptable answer choice. It's just interesting to see who's with us and where they stand on this issue as we begin to discuss it. Also, you'll notice that right next to where it says polls, there's a button, there's a link that says ask a question. If at any time during this discussion you've got a question that you'd like to ask, click that link and add it in there at the bottom. And at the end, when we get to the Q&A time, I will be happy to address that. Usually we have time to get to all the questions that are asked, but sometimes we have so many questions or the discussion just keeps going and we don't have a chance to get to all of the discussion, or all of the questions. So what you'll want to do is if you look at those questions and you see one that you'd really like to hear an answer to as well, make sure to upvote that question, because that lets me know that that's something that multiple people are interested in hearing about. And when I start in the Q&A, I'll start with the ones that seem like they will be the most use to the most people. So, okay, housekeeping details out of the way. Let's go ahead and get started with our discussion tonight. So, hi, Betsy. Hi, Jenna. Welcome. I'm glad you guys are here. Betsy says, my life beyond homeschooling is still in the homeschooling community. I lead 2 homeschool mom groups, so not sure if that counts as a life beyond homeschooling. It is a ministry, though. So, Betsy, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because what I'm here to say tonight is not that there's a certain thing you should or shouldn't be doing. But what I'm here to say is that we need to take a serious consideration about ourselves as moms, how we're doing, and what we need. And yes, it's okay to say that we have needs as related to, other activities. And so, Betsy, it might be that those ministry opportunities, though they may still be homeschooling related, are really, really lift us up and really help us to have the energy and the enthusiasm to get back into it tomorrow. I mean, what am I here doing right now? Like, this is part of my time off. And here I am doing a live video about homeschooling, right? So I'd be pretty hypocritical if I said, no, talking about homeschooling doesn't count as something that you can do as your life outside of homeschooling. Now, if you'd really rather be spending your free time doing something else and you're instead like curriculum shopping and going to homeschool mom co-op meetings just because you feel guilted and you have to and you leave feeling like I never got a break, that's a different story. So not here to judge anybody's way that they spend their free time, just here to encourage you to explore this question. First of all, I'm going to share a little bit with you about some things that I've read from Sarah Mackenzie. Now, we did an episode a while back with Mary Wilson and Amy Sloan about homeschooling as an extrovert mom. And a lot of the things that I found helpful about homeschooling as an extrovert mom have been from Sarah Mackenzie, who is also a homeschool mom and an extrovert. And she was scheduled to be one of the moms that we had on this month for By Moms for Moms for the series that we're doing this month. And I would have absolutely loved to have her, but scheduling conflicts being what they are, it ended up that she was not able to join us this month. So I'm a very poor substitute for Sarah Mackenzie, but I thought that what I would do is to start out by just highlighting a few things that I learned from her. And if you go to the page for this show on my blog, then you'll see links that I've added below the video window of, these resources that I'm talking about so that you can go check them out if you want to. I'm just going to super briefly summarize some things. So first of all, she has a whole post about being a homeschool mom who's also an extrovert. And she's got some really good, helpful things in there. And I think it applies whether you're an extrovert mom or not. One of the items is about working. And she actually had a job at a library, surprise, surprise, before she had a podcast. And she says that now the podcasting that she does is her, outside of the house, even though she's doing it from inside of her house. It's her like outside activity that she does. So there you go. Sarah Mackenzie's, free time upbuilding, rejuvenating activity is also homeschool focused. So that's totally allowed. Betsy, I don't know if that feels a little bit encouraging to you to know that that's also how Sarah Mackenzie feels refueled and gets her people time during the week. Another thing that I found really interesting was there's a podcast that I listened to called Biz Mavens, B-I-Z, Mavens, Biz Mavens, by a woman whom I really admire. And she is interviewing other business women, many of whom are, moms with children, many of whom are homeschool moms. So very similar lifestyles to what I'm living rather than, the typical business podcast where it's like men who are working 90 hours a week and something I completely can't relate to in my schedule. But one of the coolest episodes is where my friend Jenny, the Biz Mavens host, is interviewing Sarah Mackenzie because Sarah's business is one that I know from the consumer perspective. So it was really kind of cool to get to hear a little bit about the behind the scenes. And truthfully, the part that I loved the most was when she talks about how she got started with her podcast. And it really resonated with me because she started the Read Aloud Revival podcast when her twins, now if you don't know anything about Sarah Mackenzie, she's got 6 kids and the youngest 2 are twins who are now, I think they might be 4 now. But, and if you know better, then tell me. But anyway, when the youngest 2 were babies, and she started the podcast because she just really needed something to keep her brain active. She really needed some kind of outside thing because she was kind of deep in the trenches of like nursing and diapers and crying babies and all that kind of stuff all the time. And it was so encouraging to me personally to hear that because, I started my sibling course that I offer a few times a year. I started that last summer when my littlest was not even a year old. And, good friends and other blogging, quote unquote, coworkers would say things to me like, oh, give yourself a break. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. You have a baby, take time, be with your family. And I really appreciated that. I knew that they were saying it from a place of love and support, but I just kept saying, no, you don't get it. This is not about like, oh, I can't slack off. I have to build my empire. This is like, I am desperate. I need something, like I need a challenge. I need something to do. I need something, that feels creative and productive, other than just, the child parenting, homeschooling things that I was doing during the day. And again, to kind of go back to the same thing Betsy said, what did I do with my free time? I wrote a course about helping moms to mediate sibling conflict. So how far did I pull my head out of the trenches? Not very. But it was just a different angle, a different avenue to help me feel like I was, I don't know, I just felt alive. I felt refreshed and rejuvenated by having something like that to work on. And of course, there's a lot of learning that goes into a project like that. And I feel like, give me an amen if you feel this way too. But moms have got to keep learning. And it doesn't have to be in a money-making, venture, but just to have something where you continue learning. Last winter from about, I think it was like October through February, I was taking a course online. And I said to my husband, like, I have not felt this alive in so long. It was so good for me, especially over the winter, because I feel like, I was talking to my friend Kate Curley about this. You get into the winter months where it's really dark and you tend to your mood tends to slide anyway. And we were both in this course together, and we were like, you know what, this might be a thing now. We might need to do some kind of learning thing every like November to February to prevent that, like, what is the point of even getting out of bed kind of downhill slide of the mood during the winter. So, right, Jenna says, yes, yes, yes. Betsy says, yes, we must keep learning. Natalie says, amen. And if you need a little extra push, if mom's needs are not enough to push you over the edge into doing something like that, just remember what a great example it is to your children to see that learning is something that happens all your life. It's not something you do in a book from kindergarten to 12th grade, right? Lifelong learning, one of the core tenets of homeschooling. So there you go. We just can't get away from that homeschooling no matter which direction we head. So anyway, so all that to say, I also included a link to the podcast where Sarah was on talking about when she started her podcast and the business and all that. That was interesting. And, one of the things that I found very valuable about Sarah, and of course, many other women, including especially Pam Barnhill, who's going to be on at the end of the month. It is so, so valuable for us as homeschool moms to have, speakers at conventions and speakers on podcasts who are also homeschool moms in the trenches. Now, I'm not trying to slam dads or business people or businessmen or whatever, but, it's one thing for a curriculum textbook company representative person to stand up and say, this is how you should teach math. It's another thing for a mom who still has jelly on the leg of her pants from the toddler who was tugging on her while she was trying to teach math to share with you about how to teach math. So, Sarah she and I we talked about this at the Great Homeschool Convention in South Carolina about the real blessing of having homeschool encouragement from other homeschool moms. Betsy says, and it can be fun and easy. It doesn't have to be hard learning. Right, Betsy. So it doesn't have to be like, okay, let me reteach myself calculus just for the fun of it. Unless that's what's fun for you, in which case, go for it. Natalie says, love that, right? I know, isn't it so good to hear from other homeschool moms? So encouraging. So those are just a few little tidbits that I thought of that I was going to talk to Sarah about, and I wish I could have, and I hope I can have her on another time. But anyway, I'm sort of like channeling a little bit of Sarah McKenzie into our talk tonight, and I've dropped those links so you can check those out more later. But let's talk about you, okay? So should you have some kind of hobby, job, side gig? And I just want to say, this could be a money-making thing, but I'm not necessarily talking about like, should you make money? Maybe I'm talking about, is it okay to make money? Maybe I'm talking about, is it okay to take time to do something that makes money? But I'm not really talking about the dollar value of it. I mean, this could be like a photography hobby that doesn't necessarily bring in income, but it does, give you that space to breathe and rejuvenate you a little bit. And I think it really varies from mom to mom. I think, some moms might be just homeschooling. And I use that word just very kindly. I don't mean to, lower that position of just homeschooling. But I mean, some moms may be really just primarily focused on the home and the homeschooling and the activities that surround that. And they're perfectly fine with that. And that's perfectly fine. But I want you to think about a couple of things, especially if you're feeling a little bit itchy, like, I kind of would like to do something else, or I'm starting to do something else, and I'm wondering if this is okay, or I'm wondering how to think about it, or how to consider what amount of time or energy to put into this. Excuse me. So the first thing I want you to think about is this. If you're going to homeschool, it really needs to be a complete buy-in from both you and your husband, right? Now, what that is going to look like, how that arrangement is going to look, in different families, it's going to be different. But here's what can be really toxic. If, the mom says, you know what, I think we should homeschool, or I really want to homeschool. And dad's approach is kind of like, that sounds completely ridiculous to me. But if you really want to do that, then I guess I'm okay with it. But he's really against the idea of that spilling over into his life at all, right? So if the family chooses to homeschool And what that means is that mom's life gets completely flipped upside down and turned inside out. And dad's life is pretty much exactly as it would be if his kids were in a traditional school setting. That could be a recipe for disaster. And I say could because, I know people who, for example, if you guys follow Everyday Runner Christy on Instagram, I love her. Her husband is full-time military, and she's often not just doing all the homeschooling by herself, but like doing all the parenting by herself. She is solo parenting. And that is an arrangement that she and her husband have agreed with. And she's also really gifted at finding time for herself to do the things that, lift her up. So she's run every single day for, it's like over 1,000 now, like over 1,000 days. She's had a run every single day. I'm not a runner, so even just like running itself really impresses me. But to do it every single day for 1,000 days. And she'll put on her Instagram 60-second self-care. So she'll just share these little things on her Instagram stories, just little things like go light a candle or go read a poem or like play music that you can dance to, or like just a little thing like that, right? So, I don't want you to hear me saying like, if dad doesn't do 50% of the homeschooling, then this is an abusive and toxic situation and you shouldn't be, standing for that. That's not where I'm going with this. I'm just saying that at least, in philosophy and in spirit, this needs to be something where both mom and dad are willing to make sacrifices. And what that looks like in every home is going to be completely different. It might look like some sacrifice of time. In my home, that's what it looks like, that my husband is giving me some time, like tonight, he gives me Tuesday nights off so that I can come do this. And he does that, not just because he loves me and he wants me to do that, which he does, but he does it as an acknowledgement that in order for the homeschool to keep running and to keep, to be healthy and to be functional, it's important for me to do this. It's not just like you're doing it because you like to, but like he actually sees this as a support of our homeschool, which it totally is. So it could look like a gift of some time, sacrifice of some time. It could be sacrifice of some money. So perhaps the budget is not going to look the same as it would if your kids were in public school. And I don't just mean like he's willing to shell out cash for curriculum, but for mom to go to a homeschool conference or a retreat, or mom to go to some kind of conference or retreat or girls' weekend that's not homeschooling related at all. Sacrifices are hard, right? So when you have these conversations, you want to understand that there's going to be a little bit of like a, who moved my cheese kind of reaction. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't love you. It just means that you're approaching something new and you're discussing an idea that involves some change. But if both of you are committed to homeschooling as, this is something we both feel is really important, and this is something that we want to help to happen, and we want it to be healthy for the children and healthy for you, mom, then that commitment to homeschooling will enable him to think, bigger picture beyond just like, we need to make sure we have a math curriculum and we need to make sure that we have some notebooks or something. But, we need to make sure that we have a healthy mom who has an avenue for learning that can help to keep her brain alive and help to keep her in a healthy place emotionally. What we're doing homeschooling is really weird. And I know you hear that from other channels, and I'm telling you this in a kind of a different way. But, we in the homeschool community, we kind of think of what we're doing as like really traditional, but it totally isn't. This is not traditional. And I don't just mean like, it's not traditional schooling. We already knew that. But I mean, what we're doing in homeschooling, it doesn't line up with any previous decade or any previous century before. Like you might say, oh, well, in the 1950s, all the women stayed home while the men went out to office jobs. Okay. But then the kids were at public school. So the moms were doing, things during the day without the kids, and they were participating in, I don't know, I'm just speaking stereotypically, but like garden clubs and women's Rotary Club meetings and that kind of thing. Or maybe you say, oh, well, 100, 150 years ago, everybody was homeschooled. Okay, right. Everybody spent a couple of minutes a day sitting by the fireside with their slate so that mama could remind them of their phonics and, have them read the King James Bible to her. Mama, 150 years ago, by the hearth in the farm, was not homeschooling children who are expected to, take the PSATs in 10th grade and be college ready by 12th. So there's really nothing that aligns with what it is that you are doing and the amount of expectations that we are held to in the homeschool. We're doing something. And, we all kind of signed up for that. We all kind of said, like, I volunteered to do something really countercultural. And we're okay with that. When the person at the grocery store says, what about socialization? We're like, yeah, okay, I'm used to that. I'm prepared for that. But here's the thing you got to remember, ladies, swimming upstream burns a lot more calories than swimming downstream. It just does. You can be countercultural and you can say, I'm not going to mind what society thinks. And that's fine. That's good. That's, building some strong, independent muscles, but it is still going to cost. It is still going to expend extra energy. And so failing to take that into consideration isn't like independence or positive thinking. It's just a failure to hold a grasp on reality, right? So if you're doing this weird countercultural thing that's expending more energy than the quote normal way to do things, you have to account for that. You have to budget for that, right? So like, can you live in our society without a car? You can. Yes, you can. It is possible. It's not, immoral or unethical to not have a car, but then you're going to have to consider a lot of other things that you're going to have to do in order to make, that lifestyle possible. They're going to be limited as to where you can live. You're going to be limited as to what kind of job you can have, different things like that, right? So you can be countercultural, but it always comes with a cost. And I personally think that the cost is worth it. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I get up every morning. But to fail to reckon with that cost, that's just not wise. So that's what we need to do when we're thinking about, our role as homeschool moms and the time that we're spending on things, both the actual homeschooling and, and then some kind of outside or quasi outside of homeschooling activity that we're doing. And sometimes we can begin homeschooling or, begin on this mom lifestyle of staying at home. And we don't really feel a need for something outside of the home. And, like I said, different people, different seasons, you do what works for you. But this is often what happens. We start out and we say, I'm good. I can homeschool all day and I can, lesson plan and fold laundry and meal prep all night and then get up tomorrow morning and do it again. And I'm good to go. And then after a while, I don't know what it is, if it's time that's gone by, if it's, number of children that we have, if it's getting weary, if it's, our bodies are changing and, the phase of life that we're in changes. And you might come to a place where you say, you know what, I'm starting to dread doing this again tomorrow morning. And I'm starting to dread, that my life is looking like this horizon of, flat gray for the next 20 years or whatever it is. And I'm feeling a little challenged to drum up the enthusiasm that I need to keep doing this. And so we might say, okay, I think I need to stretch a little bit. I think I need to get up and wiggle around and get the blood flowing, mentally speaking. And it can feel a little like we've changed our minds, or you might have friends who are like thinking, oh, I thought you were committed to homeschooling. So now are you changing your philosophy or have you changed your principles? And so I want to tell you a story that I think is, on the one hand, it's just a funny story. But I also think it's a great analogy for what's happening here and what we're doing. So when I was, 10 or 12 or something like that, I told my parents that I wanted to start taking showers instead of baths. Well, we had been on well water for my whole childhood. And not too long before that, we had switched over to county water. So we were, for the first time ever, paying for our water. And so my dad was a little concerned that if I was taking showers, it would use up a lot more water. And he was kind of, conscientious about how much water we were using. So he said to me, I'm not sure if he was joking or just kind of nudging me in the right direction. But he said, okay, but if the water bill is significantly higher than last month, then you're going to have to pay the difference. Well, the end of the month came and he got the new water bill and he called me over and he said, okay, here's what the water bill was last month. And it was like $30. And here's what it is this month. And it was like $350. I kid you not. And I was mortified. Like I thought, okay, I've ruined my family. I've just, used somehow $300 worth of water by taking showers. And I wasn't even taking showers every day. He was kidding me because it had turned out, it was so funny that it just happened to happen right in that month when we had this deal about whether or not I made the water bill go up. But this is what had actually happened. Several months back, when we went on county water, they came and they hooked up our water and they hooked up our meter and they started billing us every month, but they were only billing us the service fee every month. Nobody had actually come out and read the meter. And so that month, they just happened to come out for the first time ever and read the meter. And of course, we'd racked up 4 or 5, 6 months worth of water usage. And so they charged us for all those months of water usage. And suddenly my parents had this big bill to pay. And I think they worked out a plan or something, let them pay it a little over time or whatever. But anyway, the reason I'm telling that story, besides the funny part about the fact that I thought that I financially ruined my family by taking showers, is that, sometimes it happens like this with us as moms and with our energy, right? Like we think we're fine because we're paying this $30 a month and we're just fine. And that can fit into the budget and it doesn't bother anybody and it doesn't inconvenience our husbands and it's all good. And then suddenly we get this $350 bill. And it feels like to us and probably, to our husbands, maybe to our kids, it feels like we've just splurged, right? But we're actually not being, selfish or wasteful. What we're actually doing is taking into account for the last however long it's been that we haven't accounted for that in our budget. Because, my parents technically had actually been spending that money every month. They didn't know it. There wasn't a record of it. They weren't being charged for it, but that money had been spent a little bit every month. They just never had to account for it because the meter hadn't been read. And so I think that's how it is with us as homeschool moms in our, in our day-to-day life. Sometimes it comes a place where we say, I need something different. And it's not really that we've changed. It's not really that we've, given up or given in or our principles are different or something. It's really just that we haven't been accounting all along for this need that we had. And suddenly it's built up far enough that it's kind of bubbled over the surface and come to our attention. And it might feel to our family like we're changing, making a change or switching gears. But what's actually happening is we're just beginning to reckon for an expense that's been accruing all along, if that makes any sense. Okay, so let me, at this point, let's see. I think the next thing I want to do is to just go ahead and share with you a little bit about the planner that I use. Jenna says, that's great. I'm glad. That's encouraging. Betsy, good. I'm glad that makes sense. If you go to have a conversation with your husband about this and he's feeling a little anxious, acknowledge his concerns. Because again, change is hard. And, my husband, has been very gracious to allow me to do various things for the blog and pardon me, in the website. But he's told me recently, and he's such a kind of a steady on the outside kind of guy that I didn't even get a hint of this at the time. But he did say, that when I started doing more of this, he did have moments where he would say, oh dear, where is this heading? What is this going to lead to? How much, is this going to take over everything? How much is this going to change? And for him, in our situation, the thing that brought a lot of peace for him was just seeing how good it was for me and how it really helped me to flourish. And so for him, it no longer became a question of what if. It became like he was seeing the payoff and he was benefiting from the payoff. So, it might take a little time. It might take a little, trust. It might take a little experimentation of how to get that balance going. But If your husband's feeling anxious about it, or if your kids are feeling anxious about it, then, you don't have to argue them down. You can say, I get it. I understand why this might be a little concerning or unsettling. Let's see. Betsy says it makes total sense. Sarah says total sense. That's great. Betsy says, sounds like you have a wonderful hubby. I do. I really do. I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for that. Okay. All right. Let me grab my planner, and I'm just going to show you really quickly. I'm going to pop up a green button down here at the bottom of the screen because I thought that I would give you guys a copy of this. Now, it is super simple, and it's made for me according to my needs. So, if I was going to sell something, I would make something more, kind of generic that would apply to a variety of people. But I didn't want to get this ready as a product or anything like that. I just wanted to share it with you. So I'm sharing with you exactly what I use, not adapted or modified at all from my own personal system. It's not blog specific. You could use this for any kind of goal setting. It doesn't even have to be a business or a money-making kind of thing that you're pursuing. Just any kind of goals that you're pursuing, you could use this. And yeah, so like I said, I'll tell you how I use it, and I'll show you what mine looks like. And if you click that button right there under my face that says goals, projects, and task forms, it's just a 3-page document, and you can just print out multiple copies for the pieces that you need. Okay, so here's what it looks like. You won't be able to see it in super accurate detail, but then again, you can always download your own form and look over it if you want to see the details. But the first page is called the 12-week year. Betsy says, so pretty. I love it. Did you use Canva to make it? I used Publisher. The document that I've given you a link to is a PDF, so you don't have to have any particular program to open it. It's just a PDF, but I used Publisher to make it. But there's all kinds of things. You could definitely do this on Canva. You could do it on, what's it called? Libra Draw, I think, which is it's sort of like a free version of Publisher. So you could do that too. Okay. So the first page is called the 12-week year. And by the way, that's not my idea. There's a book called the 12-week year, which I've also linked to under the show. It's just a helpful kind of like planning mindset, being intentional about what you focus on and how you use your time kind of book. But he advises, instead of planning a whole year at a time, just plan one quarter at a time, 12 weeks. So that's my first planning page, is a 12-week year. And all of the months are across the top. So you can see that for each quarter, I have like 3 big things that I'm going to try to work on. You don't have to read what they are. That's not necessarily relevant to this conversation, but I don't care if you see what they are. And then I've taken each of the weeks of the month, and there's like a square for each of the weeks of the month. So then I take, those 3 big goals that I'm going to work on for this quarter. So for example, right now we're in quarter 2, which is right here. And so this whole page is about quarter 2. And so then I've listed for each week of the month the 3 big things that I want to work on. And then at the bottom, I just have this little section it says periodic tasks. So like the kinds of things that I'm going to need to remember to do every so often, just the repeating kinds of tasks. Okay, so what I do then is at the beginning of a new week or at the end of an old week, I take a page that looks like this, which is called a weekly sprint. And again, not my idea. Weekly sprint is something that I learned from the Blog Smarter course that I took this winter. But I take a page called Weekly Sprint, and you'll see that I've printed these off to go on the left-hand side of the page, because at the beginning of a new week, I put it face-to-face with my 12-week year page. I'm sorry, I keep hitting the microphone. Face-to-face with the 12-week year page. So I'll put a new weekly sprint here. So what I can do is I take the goals that I have for this week of the 12-week year, and then I fill them in so that my weekly sprint is based on my 12-week year goals for that week. So for example, this week on my weekly sprint, I've got 3 projects that are going. I'm working on shows, which every week I've got show stuff to do. So this is related to like the show we're doing now, the Live Without Training Wheels show, and the podcast, the Sibling Relationship Lab. And then I'm working towards launching the Sibling Opposition Solution this summer. So I have some tasks towards that. And then this particular week, I just have an others task because I have some kind of odd tasks that aren't related to any of those particular things. But here's what I love about this. I used to try to schedule my week by days. So here are the things that I need to do. And now let me figure out, so maybe it's like Saturday evening and I'm thinking about the next week. So let me think about, okay, here are the things I need to do. What should I do Monday? What should I do Tuesday? What should I do Thursday? And it never, ever, ever, ever worked out that way. Like by the end of Monday, all the plans were junk. And it was frustrating. And it was just hard to sit there on Saturday night and figure out, like, what am I going to do Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday? And like, I don't know. I don't even know, what all the details are going to be. So what I plan now a week in advance is just what tasks do I want to do? Not what days are they going to go on, but just what tasks. And then I also have like a little calendar strip right here at the top. And the only things I list on that calendar strip are things that are particularly relevant to work. So that could be either like, for example, I need to write a post for Thursday. So that's on the calendar because that's work related. Or on Saturday, I wrote down that my girls have a sewing class in the afternoon. And the reason I wrote that down is because Saturday afternoon is usually a chunk of work time for me, but it won't be this week because of the sewing class. So, things that are going to affect when I can get work done and what things are due when. I don't put like people's birthdays or other things like that. I don't put that on this calendar, just things that are going to affect my planning for work. And then, so like I said, up here at the top, 3 big projects that I'm working on. And then underneath that, I can't see what you're saying. Okay. So then underneath that, I have 3 more boxes. Now this one is for extra tasks because, there's always tasks that don't really go with any particular project, but it's just something you need to do. This one I love. This one I call Not This Week because I found that for me, one of the best ways to make good use of my time is to specifically choose things that I am not going to do this week. Because whenever I'm in the middle of a task, something will pop up and I'll go, oh, I can't forget to do that. Or, oh, that's a project I've got to get to sometime. Or, oh, I backburnered that and I forgot about it. And so now I have a category called Not This Week. And I write it down in that category. And there's a checkbox beside it, but not because I'm going to check it off this week. There's a checkbox because that way, when I transfer that task to some other week or to some, long-term list somewhere else, then I can check it off. It's been taken care of. It's been recorded somewhere. I can check it off, but I am not going to worry about that this week. And I've loved that. I've loved having a Not This Week box. And then the last box over on the right is just notes. Okay, so I plan out like what things I'm going to work on this week, but like I said, not what days. So then the daily list, after I finished filling out my weekly sheet, then I print out a daily list and I put that in on the facing page. So I have like a 2-page spread of the weekly sprint and then the daily tasks. And so that just includes a square for each day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And like I said, this is what I've made for me. It only has Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because I don't do blogging work on Sundays. So, if Sunday is like your prime day that you have time off to get stuff done and you want to use this, you can just cross out, Saturday and write weekend or whatever. You can adapt it for yourself. But like I said, I didn't take the time to make this customizable. I just gave you a copy of what I have. So mine has Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I write the dates at the top just because it helps me to reference. And then I only plan one day at a time, usually the night before, like I finish a day's worth. And then I say, okay, what am I going to work on tomorrow? So, you can see that mine has only Monday and Tuesday on it. So I probably won't, before I go to bed, take time to write out tomorrow's checklist. But tomorrow when I get up first thing in the morning, I'll be like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to look over at my weekly sprint and the 3 projects I'm working on. And I'm just going to pluck out a few tasks from each of those projects and put them on for Wednesday. And, sometimes I don't get all of the tasks from my weekly sprint done, and that's okay. Each day I'm picking, what things are now the most relevant. And sometimes that's going to change. So maybe if it's early on in the week, I have time to work on something that's not extremely essential. But, if the week gets on later and I've got a deadline coming up, well, okay, those things are going to have to drop off. Those will have to go to another week because now I really have to work on some things that are more time sensitive and that kind of thing. So I have found this system to be both simple and very helpful. I do not like trying to plan out long stretches of time and make myself long to-do lists that will not get accomplished. So I just grab, a few tasks. And if I get some done, then I have this pool over here to pull from to do more. But it's all written down somewhere. I don't have to hold it in my brain. And all I have to think about are the, 3 to 5 things that I've listed for today. Or maybe more if some of them are like really tiny tasks. But anyway, so I thought I'd share that with you. And like I said, you can use this towards any goal that you have. So, it doesn't have to be a blog thing. It doesn't have to be a money-making thing at all. It could just be, any projects that you want to work towards. You could even use it for like home improvement projects or whatever you're working on. So I hope if you find it useful, I hope you'll take it and use it. And if you start using it and you have any questions about like, what on earth did you mean that section to be for? Or what do you do with this square? Then just let me know. I'd be delighted to share. Natalie says, I love that. Thank you. Natalie, you are quite welcome. Okay. So I have shared what I had to share, and I am happy to answer questions, or I would love to hear from you guys any ideas that you've got about either the kinds of things that help you to feel rejuvenated, or how you find time for those kinds of things, or, kind of mindset things that have helped you to, to branch out and to do those kind of things. Oh, I thought of one more thing that I wanted to share, and that is that, especially if you're in a situation where you're not going to have a lot of relief from, like maybe your husband's work hours don't allow him to take over with the kids and give you time out regularly or something like that. It's still really important to find some pockets of time that you can do things. And it's really healthy and it's really good for your kids for them to hear you sometimes say no to them and to demonstrate what it looks like to set boundaries. And the funny thing is that, there's so much in our society right now about, we don't want to be like zombie moms and constantly staring at our phones. And we don't want to be like just randomly scrolling Facebook when we should be, engaged with the people around us. And that is all good and true. But somehow for me, that bled over into like extra guilt whenever I had to say no to a child because I was paying attention to something on a screen. That it was like immediately like, that's a bad mommy thing to do, to say no because you're on a screen. And it can be, there are times where I say, like I ignore my children because I'm scrolling Instagram and I probably shouldn't be doing that. And I probably should be paying attention to them. So I'm not saying I never, ever fall into that. But, there are times where what I'm doing on my device is like, I'm texting daddy the grocery list, or I've set aside this time for me to do some work and I'm emailing somebody, or I'm working on our church website, So there are plenty of times where I'm doing something legitimate, and it is legitimate for me to say to my child, no, I need to choose the screen over you right now. And I'm saying that out loud because I feel like it's kind of counter to what we're always hearing. And I'm not going against the whole like, be present, be with the people who are really around you. Don't, like live your whole life in the virtual world. I'm not pushing back against that at all. But okay, it sounds like it's resonating with you guys. Betsy says, yes, totally agree about self-imposed guilt associated with working on a screen. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Jenna says, and they tell me that they don't understand that I'm working or learning on the computer more than half the time. And Sarah says, I just read something about how boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and myself best at the same time. Yes, right, exactly. And so, it can be helpful to explain to the children right now, I am actually sending a grocery list to daddy. Right now I'm helping Pastor Molson with the church website. This is not just mommy like goofing off or mommy like being lazy or something like that. And it can help also if it's very regular and it's very expected. So I have like maybe a 45-minute to an hour window in the afternoon where they all have stuff they're supposed to be doing, and the baby's napping, and they know that that's my quiet time not to be disturbed. Now, like if there's some emergency, I'm there. I can be interrupted if I have to be, but this is not their time to like come randomly climb on my lap and tell me about their dreams and like ask me to order stuff for them on Amazon. Is that a thing in your house too? Do you have kids who are wanting to always spend their like I feel like my kids perpetually have birthday money left over that they're wanting me to order stuff from Amazon for them with. Let's see. Betsy says, I try to tell my kids that what I'm doing on screens. Right. So you're actually modeling healthy screen use for your children. And Natalie, okay, so Natalie has the Amazon thing going on there too. All right, so let's see. Let's get into some of these questions. Betsy says, how do you plan time to work on your blog, et cetera, and still do an awesome job to homeschool? So Betsy, definitely that's something that I have to think carefully about, and it's changed over time. So I'll tell you, I am a night owl. My ideal schedule would be to sleep from like 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. or something like that. That is not how my children's bodies work. And so that's not going to happen. And for a long time, I used to always kind of roll my eyes at the moms who would say, oh, I get up early in the morning before the children wake up so I can have time to myself before they whatever. I could not have done that for the very longest time. All through the pregnancies and the nursing and the tiny babies, I needed to sleep. And it wasn't laziness, and it wasn't like lack of self-discipline or organization or something. It was just biology. And I slept. And I basically slept until it seemed like the chaos downstairs was threatening to bring the house down, and then I would get up. And so I didn't have time up before the children. And I did often stay up probably too late at night because that was my only quiet window. I'm now getting up earlier in the morning before the children wake up. And I know that that's not even feasible in some households, because in some houses, as soon as mom wakes up, it's like her aura just extends to the whole household and wakes up the children. So that might not work in your family. In my family, my kids are not allowed to get out of their bed until 7. And they usually are asleep until just about that time anyway. But that gives me a smidge of predictability about when, I'll be on duty. Let's see. Betsy says, yes, they always want to window shop on Amazon. No idea where they get that from. Me neither, Betsy. Have no idea why my kids do that. Jenna says, yep, that's our house. It's a small-ish home and they can hear everything. Yep. Betsy says, awesome. You are speaking my language. So, so it's changed over time when I can find little windows for that. I will say that, my husband, like I said, is very gracious. He does give me Tuesday nights, but for the most part, what I do on like kind of my own time. When the kids get up, we start our day officially at 8:00 with like Bible time all together. And from there, I try to be all in. For the most part, I try to leave my computer and my devices. Maybe I bring my tablet down because we do listen to audiobooks and things like that. But I just try to leave my devices behind until after lunch, when I have, like I said, maybe an hour to do some work there. And then a lot of times when my husband gets home, he'll give me a little break to just, chill out in my room for a while he has the kids do some straightening and stuff like that. So I do sometimes get a little window there too, but that varies because some days he has stuff to do after work, or he has a deacon's meeting that night or something. So that's kind of hit or miss. The time before the kids wake up and the time in the afternoon are more consistent because I have more control over that time. Let's see. Betsy says, do you do Bible time and breakfast at the same time? You know what, Betsy? I know that is supposed to be what good homeschool moms do, that like during meal times, they're reading aloud, or that's when they read the Bible to their kids or something. I cannot stand the noise. And I know like the Bible's not noise. I don't mean that, but like meal times for me are sensory overload. All the people in one spot. Like particularly enjoy meal times, and there is no way I'm adding in an audiobook or, reading something. I feel like I'm constantly like up and down and, I need some more water and, I didn't get the toast I was supposed to have and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't know. That just does not work for me. Not only have I never managed it, I have never even enjoyed that. So no, we do Bible time at 8:00. Some people have already fed themselves some things before that because they were up at 7. And some people like roll out of bed and down the stairs with their blankets still wrapped around their shoulders at 8:00 and curl up in a chair as we do Bible time. As a matter of fact, just this week, we took singing a hymn out of Bible time because it was just too rough. Like some people were not awake. And I always thought like, that's a great way to get everyone to wake up. We'll sing something. And it was not happening. So I read something to them and then we pray. That's Bible time. And then they go out and do breakfast and chores. And usually after that, they have a little free time. And we don't do our first official school subject. Well, we go for a walk as a family about 9:45. And then about 10:00, we sit down and do some table school, which is like our word for morning time. So Natalie says, amen. Meals are rough, I'm guessing. Yeah. Oh, you said that. Yeah. Meals are rough. And then Betsy said, when do those kiddos eat? Right. So the ones who didn't get up before Bible time eat right after Bible time is over. So, okay. And Betsy, I don't know, an awesome job at homeschooling. Awesome is a relative term. So I think I am doing an adequate job at homeschooling. How about that? All right. Natalie says, what if your husband is on board but doesn't know how best to help you? I have a 4-month-old and 5 children. I want to better communicate, but I'm not sure how or what exactly I need. Group learning is the hardest for me. Yeah. So Natalie, sometimes it takes a little trial and error. And, sometimes it's going to change throughout the month. I don't know. I was thinking earlier today, there's probably something like this out there, but I would be fascinated to read a book about creativity and productivity throughout the month, as your cycles change, because there are some weeks of the month where I'm just like, I don't know why I'm even doing this. I have nothing interesting to say. I'm just a complete joke and such a loser. And why am I spending time on this? And then there are other weeks where I feel like just all perky and on top of everything and super productive. So there are some weeks where, you might just feel like you're crawling out of your skin and you just don't even want to homeschool anymore. And you're just kind of feeling despairing. And then there are other weeks where maybe you get no breaks, but it's cool. And, you just love being with your kids and you're really enjoying it. And so it might just need to be an open dialogue about, what you'd like to try and, explore something. So let's see. I mean, Betsy, you might just start by saying that. I want to try something, but I don't know what, and I don't know exactly how to try it. Oh, and you said group learning is the hardest for you. So are you saying that doing group learning, pulling all of your kids together to do a learning activity is stressful for you, or that's what you'd like to have a little help with doing? If you've got more comments on that. Whoops, I asked 2 questions in a row and then I got a yes. That was my fault. It's stressful. Yes, it's stressful to have everybody all together. I totally get it. So you might want to do group learning, but in smaller chunks. So maybe like the older 2 and then the younger 2, or just not group learning for right now. Okay, so 9, 7, 4, 2, and 4 months. Okay, so look, if you're doing something I don't know, maybe you're doing a history read aloud, and the 4-year-old and the 2-year-old can tag along. That is lovely, but that is not required. The 4-year-old and the 2-year-old do not have to listen to your history read aloud. They can play somewhere else. They can watch a movie. They can, play outside. So my yard is fenced in, and I often send the 6-year-old outside with the 4-year-old and the 2-year-old when I'm doing something with the older children. And would it be delightful if the 6-year-old could listen in and glean little pearls of learning? Yeah, but this is reality and we're dealing with what we got. And, I've also started actually doing some separate stuff with my 12 and 13-year-olds because they're kind of getting to the age where the stuff I'm doing with the younger kids, like the 11-year-old and the 9-year-old, are still excited and they still love learning things by singing. The 12 and 13-year-olds are like behaving like I'm hanging them from the ceiling by their toenails. So, and they're also able to do more, independent things, or to, we can read and discuss things that are more complex together. So, you got to flex and you got to think about, truthfully, Natalie, I don't do formal schooling with anybody until 3rd grade. And I don't mean they don't do any learning, but I mean like they don't have like specific curriculum that they have to work through. So if I had the ages that you have, then really the 9-year-old is the only one where I'd feel like, okay, we have particular things we really need to get to each day. And then the rest, you just, you flex and you flow and you do what works. So Natalie says, but otherwise they are naughty. Amen, sister. Yes, they are. The 7-year-old is amazing. Okay, you've got a gem there. Betsy says, I love that. It's so refreshing. And Natalie says, good, that's where we're at. That's where we're at too. Okay, let's see. Can you tell us more about your devotionals? Okay, so Betsy, are you talking about our Bible time, or are you talking about the sibling devotionals that I've created? Okay. All right. So here's what the sibling devotionals are. The sibling devotionals, each volume contains 4 weeks worth of material. And when I say 4 weeks worth of material, I don't mean like something to do every single day of the week for 4 weeks. I mean, it's meant to be used over the course of 4 weeks. But I'm a homeschool mom, and I know that nobody needs just one more thing to like add to their list of stuff that they do every day that actually isn't going to happen. And it's just another opportunity to feel guilty and like you wasted money and you're a failure. So every week you have a lesson to read. You gather everybody together, you read the lesson. It will take about 5 minutes. If that's all you did for the whole week, then you still would have really had a good discussion. There's lots of points in there where I actually write pause for discussion. So you can read something and then you talk about it. Might take more than 5 minutes if you're having good conversation, but that's worth it. Okay, so you read the lesson, and then you've got a whole string of different things you can print out. And it goes all the way from, so this is what I do for my kids. For my 4-year-old, I print out a sheet that just has the verse of the week written at the top and then a box at the bottom, and he draws a picture. I tell him what the verse is. I give him an idea of what it means. He draws a picture. My 6 and almost 8-year-old have a page where they trace the verse. It's like written in dotted lines, and they trace it, and then they draw a picture at the bottom. There are also pages where you can, trace the verse and then recopy it in your own hand in both print and cursive. And then for my 9, 11, 12, and 13-year-olds, I print out a page. It's like a front and back page that's called scripture journaling, and it's more like a diary type of entry. So the first thing that they do is they copy the whole verse, and their verses are longer. Like the little kids have 1 verse and the older kids have maybe 3 or 4 that include. So they copy the whole verse by hand. And then they've got application questions that they can look over it. And so it might say like, look up this other verse. Think about how that relates to what we're talking about this week. Or consider this week, when this situation happens, how do you tend to respond? Things like that. So there's like copy work, and then like 3 things for them to do during the week to think further about it. And then there's an activity at the end of every week that might be like a maze or a cut out and put the puzzle pieces together, or just some kind of like fun hands-on thing that helps them to review their verse for the week. And with my kids, if they know their verse by Friday, they get like a candy treat. And then at the end of all 4 weeks, there's a hands-on activity that they can do. And it's just something real simple, and it doesn't use weird, like resources that you have to find at a specialty supply shop or something, but it just uses like balloons or pieces of candy or Legos or something like that to just give a hands-on activity that kind of expands on or solidifies the idea that we're talking about in that volume. There's 3 so far. The first one is called Who Am I? And it's basically a walking through of the gospel. Like, I'm a sinner. I need a savior. That's the position that me and all my siblings are in. Mom and dad too. The second one is called The Fight for Peace. And it talks about how the scripture always describes peace as something you have to strive for and seek for and pursue, and what that looks like. And then the third one is called Trusting and Being Trusted. And it's about building trust in relationship and, how to trust others in relationship. So, okay, let's see. Betsy says, these pages are all included. I love it. I want to do this over summer break. What is the price? The price is $11.99 for 1 volume, or you can get a 3-volume set for $29.99. Okay. Yes, each volume is 4 weeks worth. So there's 3 different volumes. Each is a 4-week set. Yes, you are so welcome. Okay, well, that's the last question. And here we are at the end of our time. So thank you all so much for joining me this evening. Again, if you want a copy of that goals, projects, and tasks forms document, go ahead and grab it for yourself. And if you've got any questions, just find me somewhere, email me, social media, something, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. So fun. Natalie, right below my face, there's a green button that says goals, projects, and task forms. And you can click on that and get a copy of the planning pages that I use for my goals and my tasks in the business. And I will see you guys next week. We're going to be here with, how many people know about layers of learning? I'm not sure. Like, to me, that's a big name, but I'm not sure how big of a name that is in all corners of the homeschool world. Not you? Okay. Betsy, you're going to love it. It's 2 moms, sisters. Between them, they have 10 children, and they've written their own curriculum. It's kind of a unit studies based, and it covers, okay, good. Yay. I get to introduce you guys to new people. You're going to love them. They're the coolest. And they've written this curriculum that's designed to be used by everybody K-12. It's very cool. You're really going to love it. So I will be here with them next week and can't wait to tell you about it. Awesome. Can't wait. Betsy, I completely agree. All right, guys, have a great week.